So today I want to talk a bit about the Asian giant hornet, Vespa mandarinia. This particular hornet has been making quite a buzz in the media. I kind of want to go over some of the basic information regarding this hornet, especially on its biology, behavior, and potential impacts it may have in the United States. So right off the bat, by looking at the hornet, one of the first things people notice is that it is fairly large. Vespa mandarinia is the world's largest hornet. It has some distinct physical characteristics, such as the yellow-orange head. By looking at the antenna, the distal ends are black and the base is orange in color. The thorax is typically a dark brown, and then the abdomen has alternating black or dark brown and yellow-orange segments. By looking at the hornet, it's often confused with other stinging hymenopterans, such as the European hornet, which is less aggressive, the Asian hornet, which is a completely different species. It's also an invasive pest, but it's smaller. And cicada killers that we also have commonly in the United States. These are solitary wasps, and they're not aggressive towards humans. And the main concern with the Asian giant hornet are the ecological and human health impacts it may have if the hornet is able to successfully invade the United States, which is it's a concern with any type of invasive species. Just by looking at this slide, you can see there are a number of stinging hymenopterans, and you can see why people can often get the Asian giant hornet confused with other species. Just from a clockwise fashion, just looking at this, we have the bald-faced hornet on the top left, paper wasp, cicada killer, Asian giant hornet, and a yellow jacket. So why exactly are we concerned with the Asian giant hornet? Well, one of the reasons is that they prey on honeybees, such as Apis mellifera and Apis cerana. Not only do they eat them, but they have this propensity to destroy the hives. And honeybees in the US, specifically Apis mellifera, are already encountering numerous challenges with pests and other predators. They can deliver this very painful sting. And you can take a look at the image on the right, and you can see the stinger. The stingers are about 1/4 inch long, which is fairly long for an insect stinger, and it can sting through bee suits. The venom itself is fairly potent and toxic. And what they found is that about 50 or fewer stings can actually cause death in people without allergic reactions, and the stings can cause things like anaphylactic shock and organ damage. The native range of the Asian giant hornet is in Asia, where it's commonly reported in Japan and Korea. The hornet itself is able to inhabit the subtropics all the way up to the temperate zones. In terms of the hornet being in North America, it was first sighted in fall 2019. The first nest was located and destroyed in Nanaimo, British Columbia. And they also found dead specimens in Blaine, Washington, as well as destroyed hives in Bellingham, Washington. And they haven't reported the hornet anywhere else in the US yet. And you can see here, this figure on the slide is a Asian giant hornet nest. These nests can get fairly large, up to 2 feet in width. They do form these subterranean nests that are underground, and they'll look for things such as rotting pine roots, hollow trunks, rodent burrows. These colonies typically consist of a single queen and numerous workers, and they are eusocial insects, so there is cooperative brood care and nesting. They rarely nest above ground, but they have been observed in hollow trees and human structures. And Asian giant hornets typically form their nest in forested habitats. A lot of the life cycle information about the Asian giant hornet is from what researchers have observed in Japan, but I do suspect that it'll be fairly similar here in the United States. The cycle typically starts around March when the weather warms up. The mated queen will emerge and she'll feed on sap as a form of carbohydrates to get her energy levels up. From March through May, the queen will start the subterranean nest by looking for empty burrows or empty cavities. April to June, the workers will emerge and continue the colony growth. June through August, the hornets will prey on honeybees and other insects, and this is when you see the typical hawking behavior. The colony will continue to grow and mature. From July to September, the colony usually reaches its maximum size, where they'll produce young queens and males. The young queens will mate and eventually disperse to form their own colonies. September to November, you see the group predation on honeybee colonies. And then November to December, the virgin queens and males will emerge. Some queens will mate and disperse, and the other males and worker hornets will die. And then from December to March, the mated and unmated queens will overwinter in soil or other sheltered areas. The unmated queens will emerge in the spring. They'll feed on sap and they'll just die. And the mated queens will emerge and start the cycle all over again. And one of the main concerns with Asian giant hornets are their effects on honeybee hives. Honeybee hives are a rich source of food. There is protein in the form of brood and carbohydrates in the form of honey. There are typically 3 phases of attack. First is the hawking phase, where the hornet will kind of wait in front of the hive and catch a single honeybee. The worker hornet will tear the head, the abdomen, legs, and wings, and take the thorax and mash it up and form what they call is a meatball. And the hornet worker will take the meatball back to the nest to feed to the larva. Next is the slaughter phase. The hornet will actually return to the hive with a few of the other workers, and they'll capture and decapitate all the adult honeybees. And they'll just dump the bodies outside and around the hive. And the hornets will aggressively defend this hive that they just attacked. So if you are a beekeeper and you open the hive and you disturb it, the Asian giant hornets will attack the beekeeper and defend the nest as if it was their own. Next is the occupation phase. The hornets will wander the hive and they'll just take pupa and larva and bring it back to their nest and use it as a food source for themselves and the larva. The Japanese honeybee Apis cerna japonica has developed a few defenses against the Asian giant hornet. One of the defenses is that the honeybees will line the entrance of their hive and form these shimmering waves with their wings to kind of distract or confuse any of the hawking hornets. They'll also lure hornets into the hive and swarm around it, and what they'll do is they'll vibrate their wings to increase the temperature and CO2 to essentially just cook the hornet to death. The European honeybee Apis mellifera does not exhibit any of these natural defenses, so if a hornet attacks the hive, they're just defenseless. And all it takes are 20 hornets to functionally destroy a beehive. And there are human health concerns with the Asian giant hornet. We mentioned the stinger earlier, how it was fairly large, and it does deliver a very painful sting. And the sting itself can deliver a very large dose of venom. And similar to all other hymenopteran stings, there is the risk of anaphylactic shock, especially if the stings are in high numbers or if the person is allergic. And they've also seen tissue necrosis at the site of the sting. Other complications include respiratory stress, kidney failure, and liver damage. And what they recommend is that if you're stung, treat the area with ice to slow the spread of venom. And if you're stung multiple times, or if you are allergic to hymenopteran stings, seek medical attention. Mass attacks can cripple and potentially kill a human. Although this is rare, it does occur. About 40 to 50 deaths per year in Japan. And this typically happens if the hornets are defending their nests or if they are being disturbed or mishandled. So what should we do if we do see a nest? First thing is to not approach it. They do recommend to maintain a 10-foot distance for safety, and that you should contact your state Department of Agriculture. What they'll do is they will come, remove and destroy the nest, and collect the data that they need to study the Asian giant hornets. They do recommend that pest control operators do not treat the giant hornet nest. The risks associated are just too high. The last thing you want is for your technician to treat the nest and aggravate the hornets, and they attack and sting the technician. We already mentioned the human health implications, and that their stingers are also very long, and that even simple beekeeper suits cannot protect someone from their stings. And one of the most important things is they want to form these collaborative efforts to help survey hornets and to collect as much data and specimens as possible to further understand their ecological effects. And as professionals and experts in this field, it is important to form these collaborations to show that Mosquito Squad as an organization is able to help in the control and research of invasive species. But what are they doing to stop the spread? One of the things they are doing, which they are kind of modeling off of what has occurred in Japan, is to set traps. These traps are used to survey emerging queens and workers, and when they catch the hornets, they'll actually attach these radio collars onto the hornet and use it to track and destroy the nest. They'll also use heat sensing technology to find the nest. So the nest itself produces a lot of heat, and this helps to identify these subterranean nest locations. The Washington State Department of Agriculture is testing several traps and lures to find the most effective combinations. And the USDA is also developing and testing lures. There are some methods of controlling the hornets, and a lot of this has been seen in Japan and Korea. So they do have traps that they use. Some of these are homemade bottle traps with some type of fermenting liquid that attracts the hornet. There's also nest destruction, so I mentioned that. They'll look for the nest and destroy it. And they'll also have people that will watch over their beehives, and if they see any hornets that are hawking, they will physically smash the hornet using a wooden stick or a racket of some sort. They also have these insecticide bait stations. However, these are not labeled for Asian giant hornet use in the United States. And for beekeepers, they do have hive exclusion devices. These are placed in the entrances, and this allows in and out movement of the honeybee, but the holes are small enough where the Asian giant hornet cannot enter. But overall, there are just many unanswered questions, especially of what this hornet can do in the US. We don't know if the hornet is able to establish itself in the US, and if so, what are the downstream effects? Overall, we just don't know, and that's why they are conducting these studies and surveys, and why it's important that we form these collaborations with the Department of Ags if the hornet is able to spread throughout the United States. If you have any questions regarding the Asian giant hornet or just want to chat about it, feel free to contact me at kchan@mosquitosquad.co.